Welcome back to the Be a Man podcast, where we encourage men to be better men. Let's get into it. Welcome back to the Be a Man podcast. I have an exciting interview with you tonight. I had the opportunity to interview the Toxic Man account, and it's really cool. We have a great conversation about masculinity, you know, the different aspects of it that go into what being a man is all about, some of the challenges we see right now in our culture, in our world, that present some opportunities for men to really step up, to really take on the challenge, to be better men, which you know is what I'm all about. And I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. We could have went probably 3 hours, but we cut it off close to an hour just because I didn't want it to go too long. I didn't want to take up all of his night. And, you know, it's one of those where once you get on it, you can just keep going, and there's rabbit trail after rabbit trail. But, well, you always bring it back to what is masculinity. What is a man? What is manhood? And I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. So with that, if you enjoy what we're doing here, go like it, go subscribe, go hit that little bell on YouTube. Give me a follow. And if you hit that little bell, it'll pop up when there's a new episode coming out, a new interview coming out. And go rate on Apple and Spotify, these different podcast platforms where you listen, and, you know, leave a review. And, you know, most of all, though, I want you to share it with a friend. That is the number one way that the message is going to get out there, that there's ways that we can encourage other men. So go ahead, go out there, share it with a friend. I would greatly appreciate it. But with that, let's get into it. All right. Welcome to the podcast. I'm really excited you have joined me tonight. I just wanted you to introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, what people can know about you, all those sorts of cool stuff.
Well, my name is John. I'm the founder of the Toxic Man Instagram page and brand. I say we, it was me and a buddy initially started it, and I kind of bite out his half. The Toxic Man started out basically, I think you probably remember the Gillette commercial back in January of 2019. They came out and essentially said that masculinity at its traditional form is toxic. So my buddy and I, we looked at it and we're like, man, this is ridiculous. Like, there's no way that guys like us can go to the wayside. I mean, if we disappear, so does everything that's good. Yeah. So we, for a couple of days, dabbled on it, talked about, like, hey, if we're going to do a brand, what are we going to call it? And I kind of I use comedy a lot in things. I like to make people laugh. If things are bad, I like to throw a joke in. So I was like, well, let's just go tongue in cheek and stick it right back in their eye. And he's like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, let's something with toxic masculinity in the name. And we started looking around. I was like, I don't think it's going to work. It doesn't really flow. And then finally it was like, well, we want this for what we're going to have the brand to be. We want it to something a guy can look at and say, that's me. That, I attached to that. So we kind of individualized it into the Toxic Man. I think at first it was male, and then I was like, that doesn't roll right. And then man came along, like, you know, I think the Toxic Man is the way that this should go. So within a few months, I had applied for a trademark on the brand and logo, and because I really saw some potential in it. Normally, you know, that's a pretty big step to make. But I went ahead and took that, and I think by March we had everything going pretty good. I had an Instagram page, and it's funny. A couple months ago, I was looking back through the old content that I posted, and as far as the visual part of it, and it was horrible. Like, it was just not as pleasing to the eyes. Yeah. And I went through and I revamped some stuff. I took those out, but it was kind of funny to see where it was as far as the content I was doing to where it's moved now. And it gives a good basis to know, okay, we can move better even from this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, you've learned to adapt and change and see where, you know, things kind of settle, and where things kind of, what will look better, what will hit guys better. You can kind of see even from your posts, you know, they send you numbers and all that kind of stuff, and you can see like these do better than these and this does better, you know, all that sorts of cool stuff. And I love it. But tell us about that account. Like, what are you guys trying to accomplish? What are you guys trying to push men towards?
More of we see if you look in the media today, you look on the front of magazines, you look on reels on social media, you look at certain YouTube, the things that are being pushed, if you're a guy, is this normalization that it's okay to be feminine. I'm sure you know who Jordan Peterson is.
Oh yeah.
And he's great. I really like his stuff. His written and the word that he puts out there on the internet. And he talks about men have certain feminine qualities, but those shouldn't override masculine quality overall. And the same for women. You know, some women are going to have more some masculine qualities, but they shouldn't override the femininity of who they are. So the kind of where we're going with it is the traditional manliness or masculinity of being strong, being a provider, being aggressive when it needs to be aggressive, but undertone and in the right context is important. And we want to put that out there because the media is trying to take feminized men and turn men into like, oh no, it's okay if you want to be a guy and wear lipstick and have nails. And they're like, no, it's really not like that. There's a lot more to it. They take everything on the surface through, I think, identity politics.
Yeah.
But they don't take what is important on the inside that makes a man, and then we use to exude that masculinity in a good way. And they take that quality of, say, aggression. They're like, well, men are aggressive, and that's just terrible. Well, you know, it is bad when it's used wrongly. But there's times if you or I are walking through the parking lot with our wife and kids, and we see someone who's walking towards us, and we start to judge, like, okay, what's this guy doing? Why is he looking at us like this? Why is he reaching in his pockets? That aggression, if that guy has malintent, is needed. Yeah. And that's when you use it under the right tone. And that's when aggression is good. But the media and the left make it seem like all aggression from men is bad. And that's not necessarily true.
Yeah. Man, this has been on my mind for several years now. It hit me at some point that just like, what is happening? Like, why have we just kind of given in to this, your feminine side, if you will, like you're saying there? Like, when did this all happen? Because you look back in the 40s, guys are storming the beaches, guys are going to war. Even, I mean, I think you started seeing glimpses of it 60s, 70s, even like during and then post Vietnam, the hippie kind of movements there. But when did you see this like start really coming to the forefront?
I think the cultural revolution of the 60s and 70s did do something to men. And that made them the hippie, freewheeling, peace-loving. Like, peace is good. We want peace. But you've got to accept the fact that sometimes you're just not going to have peace. There's just times when it's just not possible. Yeah. You know, I've talked to certain law enforcement officers before, and they're like, hey, look, I can talk someone into cuffs 90% of the time. But there's just 10% that just aren't going to comply. Yeah. And I think it's the same way. I think it was back in the 80s, if I remember correctly, the term toxic masculinity actually became a term. And then it kind of rolled over into the 90s. And it was I can't remember, I wish I'd re-look this up now, but it was something to do with some sort of like men sit around in a circle and essentially talk about their feelings. Okay. That may be good if, say, you talk about the 40s and storming beaches. Like, those guys came back on, you know, troop carriers across the Atlantic. They experienced bad stuff. Okay. They had to see things and do things that no one should ever have to do, but they knew it was something that was their duty, right? They got to talk about it then. That's okay to talk about your feelings when you've had to do something like that, when you've gone through a critical incident. You've got to get that out. But to sit around and whine because you don't get your way, because you feel like your wife is stepping all over you, because your boss is being mean to you, or you're being forced to work, quote, too many hours, that's not talking about your feelings. That's just being spineless and not being a man.
Yeah, I hear you, man.
You know,
That's good.
That's kind of what that was about in the 90s. And
Yeah.
it kind of tailed off a little bit. And then I don't know exactly what caused Gillette to grab that term and to make it popular again. Yeah. But now, in the day that we live, where identity politics is so strong, I think it'll stick now. And that's where I feel like brands like yours and like mine truly searching and pushing out masculine content is super important, because I don't think it's going to fail off now that politics has really entrenched itself into our culture.
Yeah. And I think that's part of why, I mean, you look at our leaders now, there's very few that I would say are strong, good leaders. I mean, there's a few. I was talking to somebody earlier. I'm a fan of DeSantis in Florida. He's been hit from every angle possible and has said, I could care less. I'm going to do what I'm doing and we're going to be better for it. And he stood his ground. I'm like, where's this been? I mean, where have these leaders been? Because we haven't had them in a long time. I mean, would you agree?
He is. I 100% agree. He is a great number one example of that. Him, Tom Cotton, Josh Hawley, those are the types we need. Men that aren't going to bow down. They're not going to go off the handle and cause an issue and then have something flipped on them. Like, for instance, DeSantis, when he's attacked, he pushes back, but he pushes back in a way that's really hard for them to outflank him on.
Yeah.
I don't know how he does it. I try to study.
It's cool to watch. Yeah.
But it's great to watch. It is absolutely awesome. But you're right. You're absolutely right. We don't have those leaders. One big, you see me post it, Teddy Roosevelt. I'm reading a book right now called River of Doubt about him and learning the stuff that was one of his hardest adventures after one of the worst political losses he suffered. And he goes down to South America. And I'm not to the point yet where things start going awry, but they go south on him. And the way he was just exude manhood and masculinity and what it's supposed to be, especially from an elected official position, is insane. I mean, I don't know if you know, but he got shot in the chest before his speech.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for your listeners, it's amazing. They need to. We'll explain it, but I mean, he got shot in the chest, and the speech was folded up in his pocket. It was so thick, it stopped the bullet. It slowed the bullet down, but it still got into his chest. And he still got up there, and he spoke through his blood-soaked papers.
Yeah.
And, the thing he said right before he got on the stage was, "No one can stop a bull moose."
Dude, we need more of that. Yeah.
It's exactly right. We do need more of that. I got to slow myself down a little bit because I get very passionate about this stuff.
You're good, man. So do I. I love it. Yeah. We need more of it, because I think guys, the reason they're going to these, channels like yours, like mine, like other guys, the Order of Man, all these other guys, is that they are longing for this. They are longing for something that they know something's not right. They just can't put their finger on it, or they've, been fed these lies their whole life, and they're starting to realize that I'm not fulfilling my purpose in life as a man. So with that, what are the core essentials to manhood in your mind?
I'm going to say, first of all, protection. I mean, the most cherishable thing a man could have is a wife next to him and his kids. And protection of those cherishable things, to me, is number one. We go out somewhere as a family. I probably look paranoid. To the people don't know what I'm doing, but I'm constantly just looking around. I'm like, what's going on? I'm watching people's body language, watching their hands, and like, are people coming in? And are it one person? Is it three people? What do they look like? Like, there's just so much that goes into it. So protection is one of the number one things and a core value to me in manhood. And then provision, and you can provide that protection as well. And provision could be monetary, but I also think that it is emotional, psychological as well, especially for your wife and for your kids. With kids in the developmental phases of their life, from birth to the time that they finally fly the coop, there's certain things that we as men are supposed to provide to our children.
Definitely.
Whether that be, you know, and you have to provide. I got 2 daughters, but you got to provide differently. And trust me, it's hard. I don't know if you have children, but for me, it is difficult because I had a brother, and now that's it. And then I got 2 girls, and I'm like, I don't know what to do with these things. You know, like, you want me to wear what or play with what? Like, okay, well, if that's what you want.
Yeah. Girls change it, man.
100%. They will make your outlook on life so much different.
Yeah. And I think, and I think that's like, and that's not us diving into our feminine side. It's being a dad. I think there's we got to clarify that, because people will hear that and they'll say, well, you're just, you know, doing whatever and being feminine with your girls and all that kind of stuff. I've got 2 girls, 2 boys. So we've got both. I mean, I'm wrestling with the boys, you know, girls, you know, she wants to do doctors or do my lack of hair every night, you know. It's like I'm like, yeah, let's do it. I mean, I don't care, you know. And there's nothing, I think, demasculating about that, you know. Just playing with your kids, doing things that they enjoy, things that they are gonna build memories for the rest of their lives, that dad cares about them, dad wants to do stuff with them, you know what I mean, especially when they're little. Absolutely. Like that.
Absolutely.
I want to hit on that because I get that question quite a bit about, well, you say this, but you do this, and you know, that whole dynamic that goes in there. But sorry, I interrupted you. Get back into it.
No, absolutely. No, I mean, I want to hear what you have to say about it. You know, I know I'm the guest on here, but I still would love to hear what you have to say about it.
Okay.
Because I think it's bouncing ideas off of each other, and
sure,
you said things that I'm like, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I'm kind of I don't have a psychology degree, but I get like kind of nerdy about psychology things.
Yeah.
I mean, I read, even though it's kind of far left at times, but I read Psychology Today just for fun. But you talk about developmental stages of children, especially with daughters. I read that and I think about, you know, my daughter's going to look for a guy to marry that was like me. So if I'm standoffish, if I'm abusive in any way, any sort of negative things that harms children, she's going to more than likely gravitate towards that.
Yeah.
So, but if I'm showing the qualities of traditional masculinity and manhood in a support, provider, protector realm, she's going to see that. And hopefully when they get older, they may date a guy, and hopefully within a few days, they realize this guy isn't worth my time because he can't provide for me. He can't protect. And provide, I don't mean pay for everything. You know what I mean? I mean, like, give more than just money. I mean, emotional, you know, and mental support and help.
Yeah, definitely.
So to the girl aspect of it, like, I don't want her chasing some guy and end up pregnant at 18 years old, you know, unmarried and not know what she's going to do with the rest of her life. Now she's got a baby, you know, to take care of. I want her to be able to take care of herself and understand, like, that guy's not right for me. And if she's not getting married at 27, 28 and, you know, having kids, then so be it. But as long as she's taken care of and to be that example, maybe, you know, sitting around and playing dolls with her or helping her, you know, push her Barbie bike or whatever the case is.
Sure. Yeah. I think part of that providing that you're talking, that provision, is preparing them for the future, what's ahead. Because I mean, studies back this up too, but, you know, moms are much more influential as they are younger, much younger. Yep. Part of that is out of necessity, but as they get older, I think that dynamic changes and the level of dad goes up because we look at things in a different way. And a lot of times it's more real world. This is what you need to know. This is what you need to do in these situations. And it's my job to make sure you are prepared to handle those things. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. So I see it all the time. Like, my daughter will do something, or either of them will do something, and I'm over there trying to talk, you know, well, you did this, this, and this, common sense logic type stuff. And then, you know, she's over there halfway crying because I'm more worried about, like, teaching a lesson. And she's like, oh, don't teach the lesson yet. Let me love on her first. And I'm like, no, she needs to know now. She's like, well, she's not even going to listen to you because she's upset. I'm like, you know what? You're right. Send her over here when you're done.
Yeah, dude, I'm laughing because I completely understand.
Yeah.
I mean, my boys, I could tell them that was dumb. Do some push-ups, work it out, get over it, and move on. And after about, 2 minutes, he's done, and I mean, my oldest, she's 12. She's going to be 13 here in about 2 weeks. And so we're kind of entering that stage where it's much more dramatic. It's much more, I have to be more purposeful in my words, in my communication to her. You know what I mean? And then I have a 5-year-old daughter too, and she's different, but they're all different in different ways. But it's being very purposeful in how I communicate, because she's getting closer, and she's going to have these real world situations now that I'm not always going to be there to hold her hand as she's moving along, as I have been her whole life, basically. But making sure that I'm equipping her to be able to face those challenges of life in the near future. It's huge. It's huge. And exactly what you're talking about here. Exactly.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I could not have said it better myself. It's funny whenever the whole, because my oldest is 11, and when she starts like just randomly crying about stuff, I'm like, what are you crying about? And she's like, I don't know, it's my hormones. And I'm looking at my wife, I'm like, what do I do with this? Like, I don't know what to do. It's like Ricky Bobby. I don't know what to do with my hand.
Yeah.
I have no idea. But
it's really nothing you can do.
No, and I've learned. I'm like, you know what? I keep doing what I'm doing, and I'm like, when you're done crying, let me know. We'll figure out a solution.
Yeah.
And she's just over there crying, and then finally she gets done, and I'm like, okay, can we talk about it now, or is that gonna cause you to go back into a crying? I don't know what to
do. I'm laughing because, man, you're right.
I don't know. In some ways, I think God gave me girls because I really needed a lesson in how to deal with women. And I truly believe that in all seriousness. Like in my 20s, it was fun and everything, but then it comes down to like, you really don't know how to deal with girls. You don't know how to deal with women, and you're going to get two of them. You're not going to get one, but you're going to get two, and then you're not going to have any, any boys at all. And so you're going to have to rely on yourself on that part. I'm like, okay, if that's what you want to do.
Yeah. I mean, and that's a bigger, you're getting at something bigger there. And then I think you even realize you are, because we are taught to, men in particular, are taught to view women as more as objects in our society and in our culture. And I think it's even worse now. And it starts much younger than it did with us. I think we're not too far in age, but, and that dynamic it's causing major, what do I want to say, relationship issues, and how to deal with the opposite sex. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we could do an entire podcast on the dangers of objectification, and it's through essentially I think the biggest meltdown that we've had. It started obviously with, I think it was Playboy in the 50s.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've ever watched, who William F. Buckley is?
I know the name. I don't know why. Okay.
He was the original founder of National Review. He was a big influence on Rush Limbaugh. I was a huge Limbaugh fan. Yeah. And Buckley was a big guy. If you go on YouTube and search him, he actually does. He was a big time conservative speaker and writer, and he did an interview. I think it's like a 3-part interview. Well, it was 3 parts on YouTube, but it was an hour long, with Hugh Hefner. And it was when Hefner just started Playboy, and they had a debate back and forth about it. He talked about basically the dangers it was going to bring of his publication. And I think that's moving down the line. Magazines, when you look at the psychology of, when people, not just men, but even women, look at pornography, how it can really, it triggers the same dopamine response in your brain as cocaine and heroin can. So it's just as addictive. And then when they got to the internet phase with videos becoming more, obviously you had VHSs, but the accessibility in the internet, I think has really ramped up that objectification that you're talking about.
Yeah. And I mean, and now with things like Pornhub and all these, social media sites, it's just, and now it's even further. Like you've got like this school I read about in Idaho, I think it was, that was teaching kindergartners these things, like
Hmm.
showing them porn and how to view
Hmm.
that. I'm like,
Hmm.
what are we doing? Like the studies are out there that show how detrimental that is to a child's development. Why are you doing this? Like it makes no sense.
Even to an adult. I mean, we'll even take like the developmental issues, like the brain of the child is developing, right?
Yeah.
So we'll even before that, we'll go straight to adulthood on this topic. It can rewire your brain. It creates little channels in your brain on how you perceive certain things and look at things due to the dopamine responses and the neurons. So just an adult male or adult female, what it can do. Then you go back to the sensitivity of a child's mind, their brain and development, how you're really going to warp it. By the time, say, a kid starts looking at 10 or 12 years old, which I think is around the average that a male will begin looking at it, by the time they hit 15, 16 in high school, they're going to be expecting these girls to be doing certain things, which females typically end up getting exposed to it later on into their teenage years. So they're going to be way behind. And the boys going to be telling the girl to do things, and she's going to be, of course, manipulatable. If you love me, you would do this.
Yeah.
And they're going to be uncomfortable with it. It's like I said, that could be a whole podcast right there in itself. Multiple series of how dangerous it is.
Yeah.
But it's going to be, going back to your original statement. Yeah. But our society, it clashes on itself, right? It says don't objectify women, but then it pushes pseudo pornography on the television.
Yeah.
Just on regular television alone, what it pushes is enough to start chemically changing a young boy's brain.
It triggers, it triggers those different chemical imbalances that start and makes him desire more, and he can find it pretty easily. And I totally agree with you, and I think that is why we need more men like you, like others, who are trying to encourage boys, men, other people, that there's a better way. I mean, it doesn't have to be that route, because it's going to end in, horrible consequences, devastating consequences for many if they keep going down that toxic route that they're on. Now, what they need to embrace is toxic masculinity, which you're all about. What drives you to do this? I ask people that a lot, and it's always different, but it's always encouraging, I think, to hear.
I think with it drives me because the outreach, I'm not saying I know what I'm doing or 100% right, because I've never done this before, but I have a passion for what real masculinity is. And what drives me is I have an opportunity through social media to push out, to help change maybe one guy, maybe a guy like Jordan Peterson we're talking about earlier. His biggest audience, I think, is men, and I think it's around like 60 to 70% or essentially high school age males up to about 30 who don't know where they're going. And I'm hoping maybe there's something I post, something I write, that one thing can make it like just click in their mind and go, I can do that. And it becomes something. I don't want to know about it. I don't need to know about it. I just hope that it does change that one guy.
That's awesome.
And it puts a guy who's kind of wayward, kind of doesn't know what he wants to do, maybe jumping from girl to girl to girl to girl, think he's going to get satisfaction out of some sort of sexual encounter. To say, you know what? No, this isn't healthy for me. I could end up with disease. I could end up with a child that, essentially, I don't clean up my act, doesn't have a father, or, something even worse. And I guess the drive to hopefully change someone who's just kind of wondering, to be focused and to settle down, to have a family, because families matter. I think that's a real core value that is getting lost in society today. And then have a good career and have satisfaction and have a feeling of purpose.
Ooh, that's good. Yeah. I Yeah, I'm with you on all that. And I think that young men in particular are longing for this. They're longing for something that they can grasp. I think I've been really trying hard to see the bright side of these last few years. And because at first I couldn't see it. And the more I keep thinking about it, the more I continue to see young people, they're realizing what we have been doing isn't good enough. And they have a desire to want more. Now, that more could be several different things, but if they run across your content, they run across mine, they run across some others that I know or that you follow as well, there's potential that that's going to set them on a path that is good and that will promote, true masculinity in their lives. But they've got to be exposed to it because they're not in school unless there's some teacher doing what we're doing here. I was fortunate. I had one of those that was pushing those things in my life, but that's pretty rare. Let's be honest, and those type of teachers, they don't last very long because they don't go with the flow. And so I think what we're trying to do and accomplish is push these young people and older people, if they've never truly grasped it, towards what being masculine, what being a man is really all about. And I think it's awesome to hear what drives you, what motivates you, because it's different for everybody. Some people, it's just something that happened in their past. And some people, it's just a newfound, I'm not fulfilling enough. There's something missing in my life and I need that challenge. And I think we were created to embrace challenge. Men in particular, all throughout history, you see they needed something to strive after. They needed some sort of challenge to embrace, or else they were empty. Do you see where I'm going with that?
I do. I think a problem is that we don't have the adventure we're supposed to have. Innately, I think we need to go out, go hunting, go out in the woods, go hike, have a little bit of a thrill. And I think with the advent of technology and air conditioning and vehicles, we've lost that way. So we don't have that thrill that we used to, that we have inside, that we need to feed. We need to feel that thrill, that adventure. Yeah. And I think that ultimately, I know this might sound a little off, but my opinion is like you meet the girl you're going to marry. It's fun, right? And then eventually it's fun. You're always looking forward to something, right? Yeah. You're looking forward to seeing her. Then it turns into, okay, we're looking forward to marrying her. Then you're looking forward to having kids. And then we get complacent with all those technologies that I mentioned. And where's the adventure anymore? What are you doing? And I think the biggest challenge we have now is maintaining looking for those adventures. And I think guys get complacent and they don't take their wives with them. They don't take their kids with them on these adventures. And I think that's what ends up causing marriages to fail in one way or the other, whether that be through infidelity, whether that be through unreconcilable differences and stuff like that. So I think the lack of adventure has really hurt us. And then it doesn't help when you have gaming systems, you have phones, you have televisions. The teenage boys, if they're not in sports or actively in something, if they just go home and they go right to their room, that kid's going to be doomed. And I think that's where content like yours and ours is important. They may come across, just going through and they come across a reel. They come across something like, what is this? And then they're finding like, that's interesting. Never thought about that. And it's like purpose. Like if you put a post out, simple, what is your purpose? And then you put something below, they're like, purpose. Like, what's the definition of purpose? You put that in there. And they're like, it's the definition of purpose. Well, what is my purpose? I'm sitting here in a room by myself. Like, what kind of purpose is that? Yeah. And I think that it's a domino effect. And I don't think, to tie it back to politics, you look at how certain, liberal people have gotten into the school system, have gotten into certain systems, right? Because conservatives didn't go in there proactively and start pushing back on them. And with this being revamped to just the last few years with the term toxic masculinity, people like you and I and the other guys out there, this is where we actively fight back. We don't let it gets so far down the road that we're trying to play catch up and probably won't ever really make a dent.
Yeah.
We cut it off quick, and then we start pushing back now. And you're going to get flack from people. I've gotten messages. What do I care? I don't care about your opinion from your random account that you obviously just made. Pound saying, block, delete, whatever. I don't care. And sometimes I respond to those people as, well, apparently you cared enough to respond, so I appreciate your input, or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think the lack of adventure is a problem.
That's huge. Yeah. That's a really good point. I don't think enough guys think about. I think we just take it for granted. We have our jobs, we do our things, we come home, we watch something or play with the kids, but we don't really think about that adventure part. And it doesn't have to cost a lot of money either. I mean, it could be going to a state park, having an adventure walk or, whatever, an adventure, walking some trails and just building memories, but also it's not normal. It's getting out. It's going beyond the normal comforts that you take for granted. I think that's a really good point. Let me flip it back to you personally. What are you doing to better yourself as a man, to grow and build yourself right now?
So I've got an entrepreneurial drive.
Yeah.
And I've tried so many different things, and up and down, failed so many different things. And that's fine. I don't care about the failing. I just don't want to stay falling. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So, I'm always, my wife kind of rolls her eyes whenever I have a new idea. She's like, okay, that's what you want to do. But, I'm working on one right now that has, I think this is the only one that she's actually said, that's a good idea. She's like, all right, we've been together for 12 years now. I'm like, all right, maybe you do. Maybe this is right. So, always working on the next thing for me. That's kind of what I do. Because I feel like if I sit stagnant, I'm going to start decreasing as a man. I keep up with, I like to, workout. I think physical fitness is huge for men, for the protection part of it, for the provision part of it. I think those feed into physical fitness. I think, always having, I guess, essentially a side hustle. Because to me, when I look at an entrepreneurial thing, to me, that's a challenge. If I'm not always challenging myself, I'm not going to feel like I'm growing or going anywhere.
Sure. Yeah.
I think reading books from other wise, men in the past, the Roosevelt types, the, Marcus Aurelius types, the Stoicism types, those things are important. I think, you only remember about 10% of what you read. But that 10% is valuable. And if you, something important, highlight it, write it down. I've got certain quotes I really like to live by that I think is really important. The one on my phone right now is calm begets calm. So no matter what happens, you always stay calm. Like kids come to me screaming, I may be like, what are we doing here? Like screaming and crying or fighting. Like, what are we doing? Why are we screaming and fighting? Always, I feel like as a man, if you're not the calm one, then everything's going to go to chaos, because women are emotionally driven and men are more not so emotionally driven. I'm not going to say logically driven, but I'm going to say they're not as emotional. And that's what we have to be. And I'm always challenging myself to stay non-emotional to anything. At my work, I work in an industry that can get very hectic at times, very chaotic at times. But the joke is, and I'm a supervisor there, the joke is I have a, quote, dad face. No matter what it is, I have a dad face. And that's essentially me just looking while whatever's going on, and it's the same all across the board, no matter what's happening. So that's for me, it's always staying calm. That's how I kind of grow myself, to answer your question. Always staying calm no matter what type of storm is going on.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, I laugh because I run we live in a small rural town, and I run our Little League program, and I always coach. I've got one who's in, kid pitch softball. I've got one who is going to be in kid pitch baseball next year, and then one who's still in t-ball, and then my future, kid coming up, he's 2, so he tries to do it.
Yeah.
He'll go up there and hit it off the tee. But, T-ball, I always laugh because people, they're like, I don't know how you do it, man. Because I've got, 20 little, 3, 4, 5, 6-year-olds running around like crazy. And I might have 2 that I can actually depend on to, make the game function. And the rest are playing in dirt and hit me with balls and all this kind of stuff. I'm just like, hey, if I'm not here, these kids are going to be in trouble. They're going to be doing all kinds of stuff. But if we can have a influence on them right now, if I can show them that I'm not going to scream, I'm not going to yell, out of anger or any of that kind of, stuff. If I can keep that level head and, parents just look at me and they're like, what in the world? How do you do it, man?
Right.
No, it just, we have emotions, we have feelings, but we can't let those rule us. Like they're gifts. I mean, anger is not always a bad thing. Sadness is not always a bad thing. I think those are good emotions, but when we allow them to control us, that's when the issues start. And for men, I think we have a bent towards keeping a level head. We also have a bent towards letting our anger get the better of us. Mm-hmm. And if we can bring those back down into submission, I guess is a good word for it, then we can, have an influence, but also, I think, show other men that you don't have to lose it. You don't have to fly off the handle. You can do this too. You can be an example. You can live this out. You know what I mean?
100%. Yeah, I think that I don't know how else to put it. I think that's great.
Yeah.
I think that I think the more calm you are and the higher the stress goes, the more impressive it is. And you're talking about not letting the emotions control you. Sometimes all it takes is literally like whenever something you think about, someone makes you mad, sad, you want to flip out on something, get angry. Like, I mean, 'cause I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm perfect. Yes, something might get me eventually and I start to get angry, but I just sit there for a second and I let that initial feeling go through me of that anger. And I'm like, okay, we're good.
Yeah.
Let's calm it down. And I think that sometimes it's a few seconds. Whatever comes to mind first isn't the thing you need to say, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If soon as something comes ahead, you need to hold off on it. And like, okay, I've typed out text messages before and be like, that's probably not the best. And going back out of that.
I'm going to erase that and redo. Yeah.
Erase that out. I'm going to wait a few minutes. Not responding to, if you're getting kind of heated back and forth on text messages with someone, don't respond back right away. You can read it, but nothing says you have to respond right away. Yeah. But I think as men, like that's us. Like we, you have the women who are more prone to emotional, and then us as guys, like we got to be there to calm them down. Like there's many times my wife will start getting kind of worked up about something. I'm like, hold on, let's think about this. Let's do this. Let's do that. But the great thing about it is she's learned by watching me, and over the years she's gotten less and less prone to emotional reactions. And if something does start to get under my skin, she's good about like, hey, you should think about this, you think about that. Like she gets me distracted from it. And then I'm like, I see what you did there. You got me. Good job.
Yeah. You learn how to, balance that. We're going on, I think 15 this December will be our 15th. Nice. So yeah, you kind of learn that balance. She pushes me in some areas, I push her back in some areas, and you learn that balance. But I think something you're getting at there is super important for guys, and that is to know your weaknesses. Like if you know you're prone to anger, mm-hmm. you got to know your weaknesses. I mean, and work on them. Excel at your strengths and improve in your weaknesses. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's obvious. It's easy to say, well, I'm good at this, this, and this. It's harder to accept that like I may be prone to this, or this, like anger or aggravation or sadness, whatever it is. But until you identify those things, you're not going to become a better man. Yeah. I mean, you're always, as kind of cliche as it is, you're only going to be as good as your weakest emotion, I guess you could say, or your less controlled emotion. To put it back to what you're saying earlier about being in control of your emotions. Your emotions are great. They serve a purpose. However, It's when they overtake you is when you become weak. So a way to stay strong is to be able to control those emotions. But yes, you're absolutely right. That identifying the weakness and being man enough to say, I've got a weakness here and I want to get it fixed is the best move that you can make for yourself individually.
It's awesome. Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. But man, we've been going for like an hour and it feels like we've been going for like 10 minutes. You know what I mean?
I didn't realize it's already been an hour.
We're gonna have to do this again at some point because there's a lot of rabbit trails we could go down here. But I appreciate, man, you coming on, but I wanted to give you like the final word, like the final challenge to men listening to this. What would you tell them? You know, maybe 2 or 3 things. Here's how you could be a better man today.
I would say pointing out to yourself and being honest with yourself about your weakness, what we were just talking about, because I think that's where it begins. Like, you're going to get stronger till you point out your weaknesses. I would say that, and find you a good, solid quote that means something to you as a man and as a person, and put it on the back of your phone. So every time you look at your phone, you see it right there in front of your face. And if it ever gets to a point where you don't even notice it anymore, you need to switch up that quote and get something else on there that means something to you. Because as soon as something goes numb to you, it doesn't mean anything anymore. But if you look at that quote, like I have the quote I was telling you about that I have, that calm begets calm, that's been on my phone for a year now because I haven't gotten numb to it yet. And I don't want to get numb to it.
Awesome.
So that's why I've chosen to not let myself get numb to it. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So I haven't had to change it yet, but I would say those 2 things: find that weakness, start working on it, and then get that quote. So constantly make you better. I think that's a good starting point.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's really good. I mean, I think mine recently has been embrace the suck. I mean, that's been what this is more of a challenging part of the year for me. A lot of, things, responsibilities, things to do and whatever. So I've been purposefully trying to go into it with a more a game plan to have a successful, holiday season here as we go. There's lots of traveling, lots of things going on. It's easy to get, I'm just ready for January to hit, but I've been going into it this year much more purposeful. Whatever comes, we're going to embrace it. We're going to take it on and we're going to just keep pushing forward. And I love what you said there, those 2 points. And I think guys will catch on to that too, I hope. And that it'll help push them to be better men, because that's what we're all about, is developing and seeing men embrace the role that they should be embracing in this life. And that is to be masculine men. And dude, I appreciate this. This has been a great conversation. I think we're going to have to do it again at some point because there's a lot more things we could get into. I do believe, and I think guys would benefit from it. But if guys want to reach out to you, where's the best place to do that?
I'm most active on the Instagram handle. It's at the toxic man _. And that's where I post. You send me messages, topics, things you kind of want researched as well. That's the best place to find me. I have a Facebook page, but I'm more active on the Instagram one. And I really appreciate that you asked me to be on here. I'm really honored and humbled by that. So,
yeah, man.
I'm just glad to get the invite and come on here. And I agree. I think we could do at least 1 or 2 for all the rabbit trails that start to go down. I had to keep catching myself. I get passionate about this stuff, and then my mind starts to go down. I'm like, reel it back in. So I definitely think we need to do at least 1 to 2 more in the future.
Yeah, I agree. And I kept writing some things down. I'm like, yeah, we can't talk about that because that'll be another half an hour.
Yeah.
But yeah, I appreciate your content. I hope guys will go check you out. I'll put all that in the description as well. And I just, I'm humbled and grateful that you came on tonight. I am.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.